Yeah, so I actually changed the title of this, and this actually came out of one week of the NTF work. So I'm involved in a code project, Navigating the Future. I'm also involved in a international mentoring program around open education on supporting SDGs, and this kind of came out of a bit of those two things. So one of the things that came out is that actually it's more about digital inequalities than poverty per se, because that's a weird way of framing it. So I've kind of changed it, and I've changed it actually in the literature review as well for the NTF project. And it's exactly that. So this is not my day job, it's the academic side hustles. I think is the best way of describing it. So we'll talk a little bit about digital inequalities, a bit about this international program I'm involved with, some lesson learned and considerations, and then maybe some conclusions and just how we think about doing these things. I don't know if it's going to be 20 minutes. So, digital inequalities. It's massive, okay? There are London issues, there are UK-wide issues, and there are global issues. There are things around device type, okay? Most predominant device is a mobile phone. That is the global thing, is a mobile device. How smart that device is, how old it is, varies, but that is the dominant device, right? So that's kind of a consideration. You walk around with our laptops, we design things for laptops, but actually that's not what most people are on. Certainly in the UK, certainly not globally. Connectivity. London's got big patches with no broadband. I knew people last year that were in trending parts of East London that are on copper wire and don't have broadband. I was working with colleagues during the pandemic that were hooking up to the BT Wi-Fi next door to do some of their teaching because they didn't have Wi-Fi, right? We can have 99% broadband capability in the UK. Pre-pandemic, only about 50% of households had a broadband contract. So they are relying on mobile. Global dominant connection, mobile data. Okay, how good that is varies. In Finland, 5G everywhere. Even in the Arctic Circle, middle of nowhere. You can't put phone lines in, they're too spread out. So all the farmers talking to each other, wolves, reindeer, use mobile phones. It's amazing. Also not great if you just want to go hide in the woods and switch off. But that varies, okay? And it varies nationally, internationally. You know, there are certain villages in Wales that are in valleys where there's only one mobile provider that's actually got a mast in the village. Okay, everything else shoots straight over the top. My train line into King's Cross, massive black holes, can't do anything, and the Wi-Fi on the train doesn't work. So if I'm trying to do any work on the way in, even here where there is a good infrastructure, doesn't work. If we start looking at parts of Africa, and sub-Saharan Africa, where most refugees are, there are massive infrastructure problems, but I'll get into anyway. But that mobile connectivity doesn't necessarily exist, and if it does, it's at best 2 or 3G, usually 2G-ish on there. We also know we've got whole sections here in rural areas that don't hit the government minimum requirement of 10 megabits per second, right? Digital capabilities also massively vary. All of us that have supported colleagues for the last couple of years, we know this varies in staff. I've spoken to staff who were, I know teaching online, but still when I spoke to them were kind of like you still don't quite get it. And that kind of worries me going, how actually did you do this for the last 2 years? We know this varies in our students. I've read the Arts and Humanities Research Council report. There is massive concerns around their PhD students and their digital capabilities. And we just know this in the general population as well. You know, COVID kits sent out to everyone require you to register online for your kit. My grandfather's 82, right? There's no way he can register his COVID kit online. He does have a mobile phone. It's an ancient brick. He wouldn't even know what to do with a QR code. Okay, so we've got also this big push, certainly in the UK, this digital first for government services. That's their thing, right? Doesn't really work. So, you know, if you're kind of thinking about this, and that varies globally. What you can do digitally varies on what's available to you. So if you've only got a mobile phone, you've got limited bandwidth, then what you can do is restricted, and kind of that capability is then restricted. And in that, we've got infrastructure joy. So we've all had great fun. In the run up to Christmas, they're kind of going, yeah, we might think about asking you to switch your power off for an hour a day. in the UK because they were worried about this. We know this cost an absolute fortune. But we also know we've seen geopolitical incidents, we've seen natural disasters. You know, Ukraine has now moved all their government infrastructure into the cloud. That's no longer sitting on local servers. It's not secure there, they've put it in the cloud first. They've lost an awful lot of power. Where most refugees are in the sites to be likely most hit by global warming. So they're already displaced and they're going to be displaced again. And those sites don't have this infrastructure. They don't have the power. They don't have the Wi-Fi capability, but this is where most of our displaced people are. So that's kind of another consideration you need to think about. This bit. So there's this one organisation run out of Slovenia and the University of Norwich called Open Education for a Better World. It's about 6 years old now, maybe 7. It's an international mentoring programme, and the idea is to help address the UN Sustainable Development Goals. So the idea is that there are a bunch of international experts who work with developers to produce open materials to address more and more goals. And this is okay, I've been doing this for 5 years, it's not a big deal. It has an international advisory board, the developers and the Mentored International. So I mentored for 3 years. My first project, my first person was in Fiji. And then the last 2 were in India, and I'm currently the coordinator for the Sustainability Hub. Fiji was interesting in that, you know, we're trying to have conversations on Skype and you can't actually use video camera because you can actually get a video signal from Fiji. So time and signal were interesting. I was then looking at something they designed, which had a gamification element, which used the 3D render, and I'm trying to stream this. So not only can I not actually see them because their Wi-Fi is not good enough, I'm also then trying to run this thing running on the local server, which had like a 3D game element, which also didn't really work. Which then made me wonder, if I'm talking to you from London on a massive backlight because I'm in UCL, and I'm struggling to connect to your thing because of your connection your end, what's going to go on in Fiji with the people that this is supposed to be for, knowing that your local infrastructure can't actually talk to me on video to Skype, let alone do this 3D Unity rendering. And then the other 2 projects were kind of in India, and that has its own kind of time frame joy. And this is kind of also the fun with the hub coordination, because the majority of my projects were developers in India. They're actually academics in India. I usually end up having conversations with them at like 7 o'clock in the morning, because they can only really do lunchtime, because if we try to talk to them in the evening, it's either they're very late. Some of them have got unreliable power, they've then got everybody else at home, so you can't actually hear the conversation either, and things drop on and off. This year, I've got added complication that some of my mentors are actually then also in the UK, and I've now got a developer in the Netherlands as well. So I'm kind of juggling what I can do with what they can do and with what my developers can do, whilst also getting urgent messages from the organisers in Slovenia saying, can you just do this for this? And a great one was like 2 days before Christmas was the, yeah, can you get everyone confirmed by the 30th of December? Yeah, I can try. Didn't really work. I kind of had everyone organised by the end of February. And it's a very short turnaround. So between those 2 things then, it gets kind of interesting. So one thing is this equity of opportunity. It's an international programme, everything is in English, right? The call is in English, the reviews are in English. So to be a developer on the programme, you need to speak English. Which then means, are we necessarily getting the people that we really want on the ground to be developing things? You know, I've got a whole bunch of academics developing stuff. Great. But that has a very specific tone and specific voice. Is that the right tone and the right voice, the right people in the right place, actually develop the right learning? And I'm not so sure. Are the outputs learner-centric? I see an awful lot of stuff designed in VLEs that looks great on a PC or a laptop, a bit like that lovely gamified bit around statistics. And then I go, I know your infrastructure is a bit rubbish, and I know most people are going to be on a mobile phone. I'm not entirely sure that's going to work. I also kind of go, what's your target audience? Everyone from 8 to 80. Yeah, that doesn't really quite work either. So it's the how do we kind of get that, and how do we get that centre depth? Because I don't always think it's quite there either. Can everybody that should be a developer meaningfully engage? Well, if we've got a short turnaround, I'm requiring them to jump through a hoop to do an OER course, I'm requiring everyone to be able to speak English and present in English and potentially travel to Slovenia, probably not. And probably my biggest problem is his voices aren't being heard. So when I think about this program, and it is an amazing program, I'm not saying that it isn't, but we've got an awful lot of people from India, like a massive cohort from India, smattering around Europe. Gino's doing some great stuff in Africa, but it's not as big as it could be, and there's some stuff in South America. SCGs are global. This is a global project. Most of the mentors are European. I've got one in Malaysia, but it's kind of a smattering. So, are we truly representative in our advisory board? Are we representative in our mentors? Are we truly enabling this? And when we are designing all these things, are we taking all those inequalities into account? Even people on the ground in the country are in a privileged position working at a university. Are they actually in the right place to talk to people working on the tea plantation? Are they taking that into consideration? And I don't know if we always are. I don't know if that needs a reshape of how we even think about how we organise this mentor programme. So when we're doing these great integrated things, even when we're designing things for students, you know, I think that sometimes even during the pandemic, we kind of forgot that someone might be in Norfolk and not have a signal, or they might actually be in East London, or they've got to share a device with 6 other people in the house. We know this with primary schools, it was a big issue that people were dishing out laptops. We had colleagues at UCL actually rounding out laptops and handing them out. And that hasn't changed. And then, yeah, when you're working with people nationally, this cultural norm stuff kind of kicks in. The comment more than a question, there was an awful lot of that in Slovenia. It was kind of constant and mid-presentation. And it would be something that most of us would kind of go, oh, hang on, did you really just interrupt a UNESCO chair to tell them about your research mid-flow? But that's the norm. And there's things around time and all kinds of other stuff that are cultural norms that take a bit of getting used to be honest. I'm also horrendous with noise, like crumpling in paper bags and biscuit wrappers actually drive me a bit nuts. So the last couple of days, I've been sat in my chair, kind of here, sort of like, and on the train. But that's also another massive consideration. So when we are working directly with people, is that how does that actually pan out when we do this collaborative thing? But then also, what's normal in the stuff that we should be producing? Are we enforcing our norms on other people, and is that truly fair? So, my conclusions. Did I actually write anything, or did I not? Oh no, I didn't. Okay, so I thought I might have put myself some bullet points to kind of sum up. So, to sum up, basically, I think it's taking that learner-centric thing. Where are they? What kit have they got? You know, what is that whole piece around that learner-centric design? Okay, and are we actually necessarily great intentions, but is it the right thing? You know, do we need to think about diversifying language in how we offer these things and how we share these things? It's hard, and I've worked on some horrific projects, like child protection. which is fun, but you can't do it anyway, right? But yeah, it's not a level playing field, and it is that whole equity piece. And I'm going to stop rambling because I can't remember what I've actually put for myself on this last slide.
Okay, well, thank you very much. Yes. So over to the audience. Maybe you can provide us with some conclusions.
Abby, please be nice.
Oh no, that's great. No, I love how you talked about this being sort of your extra credit side of things.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering what you've taken from it that's impacted your professional practice.
You have to be really quite flexible with that, and that everyone's coming at it from something slightly different. So it's that, you know, I've had to work epistemological viewpoint. I have a very kind of personal viewpoint. I also have a particular viewpoint because I came through a particular track, right? So I have, you know, first year BTEC kid went to post 92. So actually I hit ideological barriers with a lot of my UCL colleagues because some of them really aren't that, right? And that's great fun. And then you've then got an international dimension, which then adds a whole other cultural bit, and it's then kind of opening that dialogue. So it's kind of made me think a lot more about what we're doing and why we're doing it. And I've had to be patient and understanding, and that self-management piece. Yeah, if you'd asked me what my values were, and this has come up in some of my coaching stuff, I probably couldn't tell you, but I know when they get wrangled because I really feel it in my stomach. And then some of that comes out in this, in there's some value stuff. And I was talking at lunchtime about how things are phrased. So you're talking about accessibility and things, and there's some language that we haven't used for like 25 years to describe these additional needs that get used in conversations, and I kind of have to kind of manage myself in that response to that, in that they're kind of saying good things with good intentions, but the language they're using to describe it is kind of quite archaic and mildly offensive, you know, would be offensive if we discussed it here now in those kind of terms. So there are things like that kind of understanding that, you know, you kind of have to rephrase things sometimes to kind of get shared understanding in a language that you both kind of understand. You know, we will say things and we use colloquialisms as well that don't always quite translate. Yeah. I also don't like getting out of bed too early. I'm doing a whole bunch of stuff at ridiculous o'clock Thursday morning because I've got to do a mini presentation with them pre-June. And of course, they're mostly in India, so I'm doing it at 7 o'clock on Thursday morning when I'm on leave. It's great. Yeah, scheduling is entertaining.
Yes. Okay. So, any more questions? Well, I'll ask one if that's okay. Yes. Just going back to this is a fairly basic question. Who are your mentors and your mentees?
My mentees right now are predominantly bar one are all in India, predominantly academics. Actually, my mentees are various. So some of them are industry professionals. Some of them are kind of come from the academic world, like I do. Yeah, so I've got a guy in the States, a guy in Ireland, a UK-based mentor who has childcare issues, so she can't always come to things that are really early. I've got a project in the Netherlands. One of my mentors in Malaysia as well. So they've got a slight time difference again. So it's, yes, I've got 7 projects I'm kind of keeping an eye on at the minute. And I'm herding 14 people from various different time zones and myself.
And huge time zone issues.
Yeah, so India is
5.5 hours.
Well, it's 4.5 because we jumped forward.
Yeah.
Someone did ask me for a time slot at 10:30 Indian Standard Time, which so there's this time zone thing, so they don't always put things in UTC. So then they ask for a time that's like 6 AM or 5 AM.
Yeah.
And you kind of go, actually, it's not. And when I was doing some of the Mozilla Open Leader stuff, this kind of came up because I was talking to people in the States, and now lots would spring forward and trying to get that time difference especially when it's voluntary as well, is really tricky.
People who are sort of there in theory, but half asleep.
Yeah.
I imagine must be a bit of a problem.
I've done things for, I think it's Global Open Ed, I was doing a session like 6 AM around Wiki Base, and I literally got up to a hoodie on, logged on, and was sitting in my bed, actually running this Global Open Ed conference session.
And then you go back to sleep. Well,
Yeah.
maybe.
And then I went back to sleep for an hour and a half.
Okay. So, any more questions? I think this is it.